Good morning. So does any remember what we were reading last week? Yes?
To Kill a Mockingbird?
To Kill a Mockingbird, yes, by Harper Lee. And Harper Lee in To Kill a Mockingbird uses a lot of figurative language. So today we're going to figure out what exactly is figurative language. But first, our objective of the day. Who can read this out loud for me? Yes.
Students will be able to understand the purpose of figurative language and be able to come up with their own examples of simile, metaphor, personification, hyperbole.
Great. So, our objective is students will be able to, so you all today, before you leave, will be able to understand these figures of speech, and you'll be able to construct your own sentences using these figures of speech. So to start off, what is a simile? Can somebody read that top definition for me?
A comparison between two unlike things using like or as.
Yes. So a simile is a comparison between two unlike things, but what is key is that it has like or as. It's very important. It has like or as. An example of this is, her eyes were blue as the sky. So here we're comparing two things. We're comparing her eyes to the sky, but it has as, so it's a simile. Next we're going to go over what a metaphor is. It's very similar to a simile, but there's something that's a little bit different. Can somebody please read that top bullet point for me?
A comparison of two unlike things does not use like or as.
Does not use like or as. That's very important. So a simile and metaphor are very similar, but a metaphor does not use like or as. Here's an example. My life is a dream. So here we're comparing the person's life to a dream, but it does not use like or as, so it's a metaphor. These two are very, very similar, so people can get confused pretty easily, but a great way to remember is by using this little analogy. A simile has the word as in it and has the letter L in it, because a simile is a comparison using as or like, which starts with the letter L. And metaphor doesn't have as or the letter L in it. Next is personification. Can somebody please read that top bullet point for me?
The attribution of human qualities or characteristics to something non-human.
Great, so that might sound a little wordy, but it's pretty simple. It's giving something that's non-human, human characteristics. For example, my computer hates me. So here we're giving something that's non-human, a computer, we're giving a human characteristic or emotion of hates me. So my computer hates me. That's a perfect example of personification. Next and lastly is hyperbole. Can somebody please read this out loud, the top definition of hyperbole? Yes, Sandra?
Exaggerated statements or claims not meant to be taken seriously.
Great. So, hyperboles are exaggerated statements. An example of this is, I am so hungry, I can eat a horse. This clearly is an exaggerated statement, because you can't really eat a horse. But why didn't whoever wrote this stop here and simply say, I am so hungry, period? Why did they add, I can eat a horse? The reason is because they wanted to be more persuasive. They wanted to be more colorful in their language. And this is one reason why we use figures of speech. And you're going to see figures of speech in your everyday life. For example, pop quiz. Who can tell me in this ad what figure of speech is being used? Maria.
A simile.
A simile. So a truck like a rock. Why do you say this is a simile?
Because it's a comparison between two unlike things, and it's a simile because it uses like.
Exactly. It's a comparison between two unlike things, perfect. And it uses like. So here we're comparing the truck to a rock, but we have the word like, so it's a simile. And some characteristics of a rock is resilient or strong, and that's what's being compared, so it's a simile. Perfect. Great job. Next. So easy a caveman can do it. What figure of speech is this? Yes?
Wouldn't that be a metaphor?
A metaphor. Why do you say metaphor?
Because it's a comparison between the caveman and car insurance.
Exactly. It's a comparison saying a caveman who really isn't technologically savvy can do this car insurance, can sign up for this car insurance. It's that easy. But it does not have like or as, so it's a metaphor. Great job. Next, this Gatorade ad. Who can tell me what figure of speech is being used here? Sandra.
That's personification.
Personification. Why do you say personification?
Because the Gatorade, which is an object, it has a human qualities. It's a fighter.
Exactly.
Boxer.
Personification. It's giving a non-human object human characteristics or emotion. So here, this non-human object of a Gatorade bottle is given the human characteristics of a fighter or a boxer. So that's perfect. Personification. Great job. And lastly, this reads, ever tried lying on 1,000 vibrating cell phones? And it's for a gum ad. What figure of speech is being used here? Yes.
That would be hyperbole.
Hyperbole, yes. Why would you say hyperbole?
Because it's you can't really lie on 1,000 vibrating cell phones.
Exactly. You can't really lie on 1,000 vibrating cell phones. It wants to give you a tingling sensation. It's a hyperbole because it's exaggerated. Perfectly. You're doing a great job. Does anybody have any questions before we move on to our group activities? No questions? Okay. So what we're going to do now is you're all going to be in groups of 4, and I'm going to hand out a worksheet. I am going to go around and I'm going to give everybody one prop from our prop box. So each group's going to have one prop. So you're going to grab a prop. Let's say your group grabs a candlestick. You are going to create figures of speech using that candlestick. So you're going to create a simile, a metaphor, statements using personification, and a statement using hyperbole. So for example, on your left-hand side column, we see it blank and it says example. We're all going to fill this out together. So, a simile. Can somebody give me an example of a simile using a candle? Yeah, Beatrice.
He stood up as straight as a candle.
Great. Can you say that one more time louder so everybody can hear you?
He stood up as straight as a candle.
He stood up as straight as a candle. That's great because it has the word as, which is a simile, and it's comparing two things. So everyone go ahead and write that down. He stood up as straight as a candle. Next is going to be metaphor. Does anybody know a metaphor using this prop that we pulled out of our prop box, candle? Yes.
Can you say the candle is our sunlight?
The candle is our sunlight. That's wonderful because we're comparing two things. Remember, metaphors don't have like or as, so go ahead and write that down. The candle is our sunlight. Great example. Next is personification. Does anybody know how to make a sentence using personification with this candlelight? No one. Okay, so for example, let's see, personification. The candle sweated onto the table. So remember, personification is giving human characteristics to a non-human object. So the candle sweated is a human characteristic. Sweating is a human characteristic we're giving to this non-human object. So go ahead and write the candle sweated onto the table, onto that example on the left. Everyone done? Okay. Next is hyperbole. Anybody know an example of hyperbole using this candlestick from our prop box? No one? Okay. The candle was brighter than the sun. Remember, hyperboles are exaggerations. So the candle was brighter than the sun. That's really exaggerated because could a candle really be brighter than the sun? No. So go ahead and write that down. The candle was brighter than the sun. Great. Everyone got that down? So that's what we're going to be doing in our groups. Does anybody have any questions before we start? Yes.
Can you have more than one figure of speech in a single sentence?
Great. That's a great question. She asked, can you have more than one figure of speech in a single sentence? And the answer to that is yes, you could have more than one figure of speech in a single sentence. For example, the pool was as cold as Antarctica. that uses both a simile and a hyperbole, because the pool was as cold, so it has as, you're comparing two things, and it's as cold as Antarctica. That is an exaggeration. So that's 2 figures of speech in 1 sentence. That's a great question. All right, so any other questions? Okay, so I'm gonna be walking around. Feel free to ask any questions. I'm gonna start on the right-hand side and I'll end up the left.